Hi, how's it going?
Hi, how are you?
Good. We're here with Dustin and Sheaf Day from CalEarth, and we're really excited to ask a few questions and really dive into the challenges and hopefully provide some additional context and answer some questions that people may have around what we've sort of collaborated on and developed with them for the Hackaday Prize this year. So thank you for taking the time to do this, and I'm really excited to just get started and learn more about how these ideas came about and what the inspiration was for what we're challenging our community to do this year.
Thanks for having
So,
Thank you very
yeah,
much. We're very honored and happy to be part of this process and look forward to seeing what kind of brilliant innovations come from our minds out there.
definitely. I think we can easily just get started with a little foundational question about CalEarth. For those who don't know too much about your organization, I think it'd be good to hear a little bit about how it started and sort of what your current projects are and what the mission of CalEarth is.
So CalEarth was founded by our father, Nader Khalili, in 1991 as a educational research institute dedicated to Earth architecture. So since that time, our father passed away in 2008, and Dastan and I have been running the institute since then. And we've had, tens of thousands of students and visitors and people who have little to no experience in architecture or engineering who've come and studied and helped us develop this range of really amazing research and educational tools, how to build using sandbags and just the material that's local, the soil that's local to an environment to build these beautiful homes. So do you want to hear some of the projects that we have going on? So we do workshops, we have tours, open house, obviously in a non-COVID time. We have many different opportunities for people to come and take classes with us, one-day workshops, week-long, weekend. We have a 12-week apprenticeship twice a year. We also have programs internationally. We also do relief efforts and different kinds of research to try to meet the needs across the world. So, in someone that has like a high rain environment and, fire prone areas, et cetera, earthquake, these shelters are designed to withstand all types of natural and man-made disasters. And we continue to do research and innovate to push the envelope of this technology.
And you were just telling me that you guys have been able to continue this programming online during the time of quarantine, which I think is really awesome. And it's a whole other level of accessibility that you guys have always sort of had. You've had the platform for, but you've been able to reach even more people with everything going on right now. So I think that's great to mention.
Always been like the top priority, right? Affordability, accessibility. We say it's important for people to be able to participate in this process, building their own homes. Shelter is a basic human right. So we continue to try to simplify and make it so that anyone can participate in this process. We send the online classes for free to anyone that can't afford to pay for them. And it's really about getting this to the people who need it the most and who are interested in learning.
Yeah, I think that's really wonderful. And I think it's a good sort of segue into the next question, because I think this question or this challenge, the open call challenge, really came out of our discussions early on about all the sort of different kinds of communities you guys serve and different sort of applications of the SuperAdobe dome structures. So I think that we can just get into that. So the challenge is, just to reiterate, design modular add-ons for CalEarth SuperAdobe dome housing models within the categories of connectivity, power harvesting, lighting, heating, water collection, and storage. And I think this really is a nice bridge of what your organization does and thinking about what the Hackaday community is really inspired by and the types of projects they like to work on. So I'm really excited to see what they do. And I think it'd be great to just hear a little bit more about where the inspiration came from your end. I know when we were talking about these things, there were a few sort of examples of ways that people wanted to maybe upgrade their structures, or, thought of something that might be missing and they wanted to add it on. And it'd be nice for them to have sort of a roadmap. So if you guys want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Our work is to empower the individual to be able to live in harmony with nature, not only a sustainable but also a regenerative lifestyle using natural materials. And that begins with the idea that everything you need is already on the site and is available in the environment. So when we start looking at it from that particular perspective, you realize that you're very, very, very highly resourced, and you don't need to bring so many things from the outside. What we're saying is that, yes, there's many ways to build, and that's okay, but we're presenting an alternative, taking the best from the past, the existing technologies that have shown resilience over millennia, and moving it into the future, because CalEarth's innovations were originally designed for off-planet habitation through work with NASA, which my father did, for the moon and Mars. So if you bring all of this together, you should be able to build yourself a sustainable home where you can harvest sunlight, where you can harvest water, where you can not only have a kind of independent grid, but also put energy back into the main grid to reduce carbon footprint. In construction alone, there's somewhere between 25 to 35% carbon footprint just from shipping materials and creating them. So imagine if you can build homes and communities where 90% of what you need is already there. And so the individual is empowered by being able to look differently at the location where they're building. And when you see through these eyes, then there's infinite possibilities to live a regenerative and sustainable lifestyle. So we're very excited to do these add-ons and these innovations to move towards that ultimate goal.
Yeah, and I would just add to that and say that, you know, what's been really exciting about building and developing these SuperAdobe structures, and we've focused almost exclusively on the building technology over the past, 28, 30 years. And really now is the time that we're continuing to think about the way to integrate with other types of technologies that are out there and find low-cost solutions so that you can have sort of upgrades in these different ways. This EcoDome that I'm inside of here virtually, you can see there's a built-in bench that's on the wall, and that bedroom that's in the back, there's this rocket stove behind me, which is a high-efficiency heating system. There's a passive cooling system, which is this window here. It opens to a wind scoop. And, there's a lot of possibilities, but I think really thinking through, integrating technology, integrating other things that people are continuing to want the comforts of sort of, modern living now, but in a tiny earthen setting. And I think that that's the exciting opportunity, especially if we can find some low cost solutions that are accessible to people, even in remote areas when we're building for, an emergency situation. If we could bring Wi-Fi or whatever it might be, but learning how to integrate those in and add things on to the SuperAdobe in a really quick and easy way will allow all of our students and apprentices around the world to be able to do so much more once the house is finished, to really make it livable and comfortable and, as Dasan was saying, sustainable and even giving back in terms of the power harvesting and the lighting and solar and whatever it might be.
Right. I think that's really well put. And I think you guys have already sort of started to cover, the ideas around not just being a sustainable solution, but affordable and scalable. Could you explain a little bit more like what that looks like to you? I think, low cost and affordable is really relative. So maybe even giving us some examples or anecdotes of specific groups of people that you think, this price point or this level of accessibility or these resources would be available. And what maybe scalability looks like. Is that for, how many people, what types of communities?
Sure. So, I think that we have to think of it's sort of twofold. We have the full spectrum of people who are interested in this architecture, people who are want a high-end, super sustainable home without, sparing any detail. And then we are also looking for ways to take this technology to remote areas where they can't even bring in machinery. So how can we create something that can sort of work in both contexts? And I think designing for both, with both in mind, whether you want to design for the low cost or the, sort of the middle class, I guess you could say, is both very important, because you want to be able to, you can argue that absolutely everyone deserves to live with integrity. And so why shouldn't you have access to different kinds of technology or amenities just because you're only able to afford, sort of a smaller type of home or shelter? So we're looking for things that will work in a disaster situation, that we could quickly add on to a 6-foot emergency shelter that's put up in a day by a bunch of people, volunteers, as well as something that can go into like a modern, like the house that Daston's in front of, this really beautiful modular multi-dome sort of luxury type of home, without losing the integrity of the architecture.
You know, what's really interesting about this work, based on your question, is that the other thing about it, making it affordable, because you're using natural materials and 90% of it's coming from your site. And if you need to do very small scale stuff, you can build just with pure earth. If you want to get building department approval and things like that, there's usually about a 10 to 15% integration of cement or lime to stabilize it for their calculation needs. But for 1/3 of the cost of a home today, you can build a house like this. And the other benefit of it is that once you've paid off your 30, 40-year mortgage, the house is not dilapidated. The structure lasts for generations and generations and generations. And then the final thing regarding affordability is that with the advent of climate change and all of the natural events that are occurring and getting larger and larger in scale, wouldn't you want to live in a house that's fireproof, hurricane-proof, earthquake resistant, works in harmony with nature, can harness the available resources of nature, and at the same time be sustainable, regenerative, and harmonious to live in? And not only that, but beautiful. So these are the things that not only on a financial scale make it affordable and reasonable, but also long-term generational, because you can pass it down from generation to generation. And that's the beauty of working with earth.
Thank you. And so have there been examples in the field or by some of your maybe students that people have created versions of these modular add-ons, whether they be hardware or maybe not hardware examples? I know you mentioned even the stove in the Ecodome, I think is a great example, but any other, you could say either popular things that people have continued to iterate on, or things that have been missing that people maybe asked for or are interested in developing, just to give our audience some ideas potentially.
Sure. So I would say, the things that we've really focused on as primary are heating and cooling. I mean, that's something that we've really tried to be able to address, and that's been the primary, right? As I said, that rocket stove that's in the Ecodome is a well-known technology and very affordable, and that's always been the key. Is yes, we've figured out how to install a full central heating and air conditioning system into a SuperAdobe structure, but that's not necessarily accessible or the most sustainable way to heat or cool a house of this type. And so people are interested in things like thermal flooring, and how do you add on solar panels to the outside, water harvesting options, things like that. And beyond that, we've found some really creative sort of attaching an outdoor shower, and that's attached to a solar panel that heats there's a lot of really creative ideas that have been integrated into SuperAdobe. We figured out you can pretty much integrate most of the modern things, electricity, plumbing, all of that. It's just figuring it out and being thoughtful about it. But there is a lot of things that we haven't just gotten to yet. And I think things that we just haven't thought about that maybe are more modern things that people are adding on to their homes, and, that are more common in maybe a middle class or upper middle class types of households, smart houses, right? We haven't really gone down that path at all, for example, is like sort of how do you make it not only sustainable, but like a high-tech kind of a house for, that could be really interesting. One issue we have that I could share is that because of the thickness of the walls, Wi-Fi doesn't transmit very well from one end of a SuperAdobe structure to the other, which in a lot of ways is great because the whatever is not flowing throughout the building. But if you want to have Wi-Fi in all of your bedrooms across your whole SuperAdobe house, we haven't really thought that much about kind of how you might do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight and something that will definitely inspire some of the entrants to tackle, hopefully. I think that's a good, that's, you know, one of many constraints we've started to mention here. You guys also covered sort of being able to work in different environments, different kinds of weather conditions. We've, you know, covered affordability, sustainability. Are there any other constraints you think are worth mentioning? Something that comes to mind for me is also maybe sort of mobility in a way, or either being able to send some of these add-ons easily. So maybe lightweight, packable or breakdownable. And that comes, I think, back to the modularity, but also maybe there's something that you have the instructions and the components, and then you're able to quickly and easily build on site or in the field, depending on the case.
Just a little bit of background to make this clear is that the essential purpose of CalEarth and what our father began from the beginning was based on housing availability globally. Today there's over something like 1.2, 1.3 billion homeless people in the world. So our base foundation is a humanitarian, addressing the humanitarian issue. And part of that, what we've come up with is called, in the beta phase, is called the duffel bag dome, where you can take two 35-pound duffel bags on any commercial flight and go to anywhere in the world. And with one instructor in 3 days, build a small structure and train 15 people. And then from that, those trained people not only will have a structure, but they will also be able to continue to build and train. As far as add-on goes, the most important thing is that it is as simple and plug and play as possible. Over complexity and too many directions and things like that will make it difficult, considering who you're delivering it to. If you're doing housing construction and you have contractors and engineers and builders available, then we can do, you know, hybridization and all that. But delivery system and simplicity is the key, which is the essence of this work, because what makes it so effective? You're using earth purely. You're basically only bringing sandbags, barbed wire, and a couple of tools, and you're building a whole structure. So with that in mind, and the concept of everything you need is in the environment, if the add-ons have that kind of base foundation idea of simplicity, which makes it very elegant, like this work, effective, and something that anybody could understand, that would be really the winning ticket.
Yeah, I think this has been really good for additional context for the entrants and starting to plant those seeds of what's possible and, you know, what the main focus should be as far as the being in line with your organization's mission. So I think we can move on next to the Dream Team Challenge, which again was, you know, designed with sort of a dream team of 3 designers, engineers, makers in mind, who will be dedicated to working on this this challenge for a 2-month engineering sprint. So what we've developed with you all at CalEarth is modular solutions that automate steps in the SuperAdobe dome construction in order to make the process more efficient, less taxing, or more cost effective. So I think right off the bat, something that would be useful is sort of breaking down the steps in building a SuperAdobe dome structure, just to lay that groundwork, and then we can elaborate from there on a few points.
SuperAdobe it's a very simple building technology, but it can be labor intensive if you don't have any machinery, right? It's designed to be done completely by hand. You can hand mix everything. You can, you fill every sandbag one by one. It's a long sandbag. You could just do it 1 scoop of earth at a time. It requires every layer has to be tamped down so it stays sturdy. And then you lay a course of barbed wire between each of the rows. That's what provides that tensile strength that keeps the building safe against earthquakes and seismic. And at each of those stages, there is quite a bit of sweat that goes into it. And we've come up with lots of ways to make it lighter and so on. We've made it accessible that we use small buckets to carry a coffee can of soil at a time. So if you can't carry heavy weight, that's okay. We've simplified it, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily, sped up or mechanized without just more people working a little bit harder. So we are continually interested in finding ways to automate certain steps. How do you make it possible maybe for one person, if they don't have anybody else, to build it by themselves, for example? And that's been asked a couple of times. We have people that you can't always get a whole group of volunteers together, right? Many hands make light work, but if you don't have 20 friends to come and help you carry little coffee cans, then you have to carry a lot more by yourself. So yeah, we're just looking at more ways to make it more efficient, so that, if you're in a remote environment, what if you don't have all the tools? Could you make some of the tools? Could you, I don't know. And again, we've continued it. We do it the same way all the time. We teach it the same way. And so it's almost like we need a fresh set of eyes, some people to come in and think about it and be really creative and see if there's something that we've missed, which I'll tell a quick story, which is that my father and his early students, they used to take individual rice bags that were 60 pounds each. They would fill them all up one by one with sand. Somebody would sew it shut, pick it up, and put it on the wall. And it took many months of that. It was a purely, labor kind of environment, men only, very construction. Some firefighters came, saw what he was doing, and recommended, you should put empty bags on the wall and fill them a shovel at a time. And that's when we switched to the coffee can technique, right? That sort of, you don't need to sew the bag shut. You could just twist it and put it down. And something as simple as that has saved time, money, made this accessible. Kids are participating. People with any kind of physical disability can participate. We've really found ways around a lot of the strain, and our students are almost 50-50 split, men and women, all ages, all backgrounds. And that is the goal, that we find ways to involve the entire community in the process.
Right. I think that that's a really nice sort of example of, like you were saying, having a fresh set of eyes, maybe look at the picture at a little bit of a different angle. And we're hoping that's what our community will be able to bring to the challenge for sure. I think you've really started to cover, the impact that potential solutions to this challenge will have on the people you guys work with, and what, the impact of even just the changes you guys have developed over the last 30 years have had in this area. So I think it'd be great to hear maybe what are some of the key skills you would imagine this dream team having, just to give an idea to potential applicants, what they might want to have in mind. I think definitely, like we're saying, fresh perspective, kind of creative thinker who's open to developing concepts and doesn't maybe need all the, the answers off the bat. This isn't just, build this device to these specifications kind of an ask. This is much more of, dynamic, I think, challenge. So any other skills you think would be useful in that regard?
Well, I think that the skills that would be useful, other than, of course, having engineering mind and design elements, is being visionary and having kind of a eagle perspective of harvesting available natural resources, light, solar for energy, or water, and then being able to apply that in a very simple and elegant way so that anybody could integrate that. So it's more of a fearlessness, a kind of being gutsy to just experiment, because that's how all of this came about. Our father developed this work in the middle of a revolution and a war in the desert, lighting entire buildings on fire and burning them while there were planes flying over bombing a nearby city. So the work has a certain sense to it that anything is possible. It's just waiting for you. So I would say, in a broad stroke, it's more of a mind state and an idea-based approach than necessarily any specific skills. But Shifter can elaborate more on skill sets if you'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, one other fun story that we might want to share is that, you know, this work had reached a certain point, and my father was, he kept reaching points that were sort of where he would get stuck and stop and be stressed out and say, oh, you know, sort of, I can't innovate any further. And one story he would always tell is that every architect has a fear of cracks in their building, that when they see a crack, that means it's a failure. And, you know, he was really trying to figure out how do you push past that fear, and what is it about that? And so what he did is he looked to nature, and he noticed how no surfaces on, you know, trees and reptiles have smooth surfaces. They all have cracked surfaces. And so he then pivoted and he started designing cracked surfaces. He called it reptiling on the outsides of his buildings. And he said, well, let's, you know, sort of embrace it and go with it, that instead of being limited by something like that, to then design it in and to carry on, right? That I think, you know, there's so much space to innovate when there are no limits, because the entire technology is based on pushing the envelope. And we continue to, now we have proof of concept. I mean, in the early days, he was speaking basically theoretical, and now we've seen these structures go through the earthquakes in Nepal, 7.2, 7.3, to go through the Thomas fires in Ventura County. They went through Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, and so on and so forth. And they withstand. We know they do. So now it's just time for us to kind of, you know, clean them up aesthetically and continue to be creative. But you're working with something that is sort of foolproof, and it's designed to be, there's a lot of wiggle room in it, right? You know, we always say the walls are a little crooked, the floors are a little crooked, but that's what makes it beautiful, right? If you look to nature, perfection is not the goal. It's access and affordability, and the safety is there. We know that's there, so we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Right. I really love that story. I remember seeing some of the images when I first was learning more about CalEarth, and seeing that you said it was reptilian sort of tile styling. Yeah. The mounds that were built on together. And I think that's really inspiring and helps people sort of get into the right, you know, mind space, like you're saying, of feeling, you know, limitless, and also thinking about how, as, you know, designers and innovators, we can embrace what's naturally happening, instead of trying to fight it all the time. Because I think sometimes there's definitely an inclination to buff it out, to fix it, to make it shiny. And that's not the sort of thing we need in this context. So I think that's a great point for sure. The potential for tools, like we said, to help out with this process. So not necessarily thinking maybe of how to automate some of those steps you mentioned earlier, but how to make the planning or the calculations or the drawings a more efficient process or more user-friendly. So I think that was an excellent point, and something that can definitely be a nice access point for people to start thinking about. Was there anything else you guys wanted to mention as far as some of those earlier conversations, ideas that had come up?
Right. Data estimation. That's a really interesting one. That's a different type of engineering. And, you know, people want to know how much sandbag do I need? How much material? How do I estimate the cost? And those are also things that we continue to develop. So, and I know that we're going to have one of our team members serve as a mentor, and I think that will be really great as well. He's one of our main builders who has a lot of this hands-on experience and can speak to some of the different things that have come up in the field. Something else to think about is that we have at CalEarth every tool at our disposal, every way of building, all of our form work, you know, that each of these windows requires a wooden form. But then we always tell our team, you're spoiled here, because we're going to send you out into the world where these things are not easy to find, or people don't know, they're not familiar with them. So the more things that we can take with us, like Dastan was saying, that what can we put in a duffel bag? What kind of instructions can we put together so someone can build a form out of whatever scrap materials, or, you know, anything like that we can put the entire system in a way that wherever you go, you can find a way to figure it out. You have to be scrappy to get it done. Because the reality is that some of the places that need this the most, they're not going to be able to access those things very easily. So we're happy to take it with us there, if it's lightweight and affordable and easy to figure out in fields under basically the opposite of ideal conditions.
You know what's very interesting is that this whole process, and thank you so much, all of you guys, for making this happen. This whole process ultimately is going to come together in some kind of a software application where you'll be able to crunch data, you'll be able to get instructions, you'll be able to, have live chats, find different people who are available in the community around you, because our community is global at this point. We've trained so many people. There's so many people around the world. There's not a country you can't go to right now where there's somebody from CalEarth there that you can reach out to that has done something. And so I'm very, very excited to see the innovations that are coming, because ultimately it's all going to go into this kind of software application technology base where then it'll truly be accessible to anyone, anywhere. And my father would always say, when you take a workshop and you're done, I should be able to drop you anywhere in the world and you can start building. And so that simple, elegant idea is the basis of this. So I really look forward to seeing what our innovators come up with to enhance that experience, so that not only are we harvesting the earth and using the most available, natural available material under our feet, but everything else from the sun and the water and any other things that they think of. And that's a very beautiful and exciting thing.
So thank you for all the wonderful stories and the insights. And like you said, we're going to have a mentor from your team, which we're so excited about that as well. There'll be mentor session opportunities throughout the challenge open call period. And also the mentor will be working with the dream team as well to answer any questions along the way. So again, I can't say how much, we appreciate you guys being involved. I'm really excited to be working with CalEarth on the 2020 Hackaday Prize, and super excited to see what everyone brings to the table once we open it up.
Thank you again for inviting us. And I just want to say that the thing that I think I appreciate the most about this process that's absolutely in alignment with our organization is the open source of this work, that everything that we come up with, that your innovators are going to come up with, is going to be accessible to everybody else. And that's absolutely the mission of this organization, and the work that we're trying to do is that this is about finding solutions and then getting them to the people who need them. So we look forward to seeing all those new solutions and helping to spread that all around the world to the people that are already building with this technology and maybe don't have those resources to figure it out on their own. So thank you for involving us in this process.
Yeah, I think that is the perfect note to end on. Thanks.